And it says that it's based on chapter 19 in the book Acts of the Apostles in the Bible, the book of Acts. So actually, let's just go there real quick to start off. And it's just from verses 21 to 41. So let's just read over that as our introduction. So Acts chapter 19, starting in verse 21. After these things were ended, Paul proposed... Oh, all right, I'll hold up just a minute.
Acts 21?
So this is Acts chapter 19, and it's just verses 21 to 41.
Okay, I'm ready.
All
Verse
right.
21 has one thing. 21 has verse 1.
So Acts 19 and verse 21. After these things were ended, Paul purposed in the Spirit, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I've been there, I must also see Rome. So he sent into Macedonia 2 of them that ministered unto him, Timotheus and Erastus. But he himself stayed in Asia for a season. And the same time there arose no small stir about that way. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen, whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation, said, Sirs, we know that by this craft we have our wealth. Moreover, you see and hear that not alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying that there be no gods which are made with hands. So that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worships. And when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And the whole city was filled with confusion. And having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. And when Paul would have entered in unto the people, the disciples suffered him not. And certain of the chiefs of Asia, which were his friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not adventure himself into the theater. Some therefore cried one thing, and some another, for the assembly was confused, and the more part knew not wherefore they were come together. In other words, they didn't know why the whole city was together. It was just a big mob. And they drew Alexander out of the multitude, the Jews putting him forward. And Alexander beckoned with the hand and would have made his defense unto the people. But when they knew that he was a Jew, all with one voice about the space of 2 hours cried out, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, Ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how that the city of the Ephesians is a worshiper of the great goddess Diana and of the image which fell down from Jupiter? Seeing then that these things cannot be spoken against, ye ought to be quiet and to do nothing rashly. For ye have brought hither these men, which are neither robbers of churches, nor yet blasphemers of your goddess. Wherefore, if Demetrius and the craftsmen which are with him have a matter against any man, the law is open, and there are deputies. Let them implead one another. But if ye inquire anything concerning other matters, it should be determined in a lawful assembly. For we are in danger to be called in question for the days of uproar, there being no cause whereby we may give an account of this concourse. And when he had thus spoken, he dismissed the assembly. So here this town clerk had intervened successfully to quiet the mob and reason with them before they could try to tear Paul apart or anybody else. So Paul's friends didn't even let him go into that assembly because they knew he wouldn't come out alive because the emotions were so high. So let's look at the chapter now in Acts of the Apostles. Okay, can you hear me okay now?
And just for good measure, they laid off a bunch of Zoom workers today,
Oh,
a certain percentage of their staff.
I actually think this is not a Zoom problem. This is definitely our computer problem. So the computer actually froze.
No, teaching us how to repair them all and write programs to do anything.
Okay.
Yeah, right. How about that?
All right, I guess the sound is working now, so we'll try again. So
Knock on wood.
as I was saying,
Praise
as I was saying, it's a short chapter, and so maybe even with the technical difficulties, we'll still get through it. Oh, and here's the pastor. You made it on crutches. Do you mind handing him the gray mic?
Basketball star is injuring.
Yeah. It should be on.
What do you say?
Yeah, so Pastor, feel free to fill us in on some historic details as well as we go through the chapter. So we just read the verses in Acts that this chapter is based on. And then she fills out a lot of this because some of the details are given in the chapter in Acts, but you might miss some of the meaning of these details, which I think is very nicely brought out in the book Acts of the Apostles. And so in the third paragraph there, it says, once a year, special ceremonies were held at Ephesus in honor of the goddess Diana. These attracted great numbers of people from all parts of the province. Throughout this period, festivities were conducted with the utmost pomp and splendor. And Laura, do you mind showing the pictures at the bottom there? You can just click on them. I just put it as an overlay on number 1. The bottom 3 pictures, you'll see the first picture there, that one. You can take off that's maybe the best preserved structure in Ephesus. That's the library. It's beautiful, and it's hard to, on our screen it's very small, hopefully on your screen it's big, but there are people at the bottom on the steps, and you can get an idea of the size, and that's just the ruins of the facade. And then you have the temple itself is in terrible shape. There's only like one column standing. You can show that picture, Laura. There's that's all that's left of the temple of Artemis or temple of Diana. And this was this grand temple. This temple had been built 3 times. And so at the time that Paul was there, it was the 3rd temple, and it was huge. So Laura, show the next picture as the model of that temple. That's a replica. But those trees make that model, it shows that model is not very big. The original dimensions of the finished temple, that 3rd temple, was 450 feet long, 225 feet wide, and 60 feet high. Now, 60 feet high is roughly 6 stories. So it's a 6-story tall building that's 450 feet long, so longer than a football field, like 1.5 football fields long. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's about right. About 1.5 football fields long. So it's an incredible structure. And then there was somebody wrote about this. It says, described by Antipater of Sidon, lists the world's 7 wonders. And he says, so I don't know what year this was written, but he apparently saw this with his own eyes and said, I have set eyes on the wall of lofty Babylon, on which is a road for chariots, and the statue of Zeus by Alpheus, and the hanging gardens, and the colossus of the sun, and the huge labor of the high pyramids, and the vast tomb of Mausolus. But when I saw the house of Artemis that mounted to the clouds, those other marbles lost their brilliancy. And I said, lo, apart from Olympus, the sun never looked in aught so grand. So that's speaking of that temple of Diana in Ephesus. This guy who had seen the other 7 wonders said this one made the others pale in comparison. So that's the kind of splendor that we're talking about when she says that so this city attracted the worshipers of Diana, but then they have this huge ceremony. Festivities were conducted with the utmost pomp and splendor. So you can get an idea of the size of that place, and then the beauty of it, but also this was no like ancient backward city. This was very modern. So this gala season was a trying time for those who had newly come to the faith. That sentence right there struck me because when Laura and I were newlyweds, and you're trying to find your footing in your faith, because Laura and I didn't grow up Adventist. So I had been an Adventist for a few years, and Laura was newer to Is the computer freezing? Oh, it's good? All right. So holidays were very difficult in the beginning when we're trying to establish our faith, and I feel like this is the situation here in Ephesus. These are somewhat new believers. Paul has already planted this church, and people are coming into the faith. Paul is being very successful, but now you can hear me. I'll keep going. Good.
But it says as well that ridicule, reproach, and insult were freely heaped
Yes.
upon them by these people.
Yes, because they're turning their backs on this great ceremony with a lot of tradition. So a lot of times people associate like family traditions are wrapped up into holidays, and so when you have a different faith that doesn't match some of the traditions, Sabbath comes and you're not spending time with the family doing the things that they want to do that aren't appropriate on Sabbath. This is insulting to them. And so this is similar here, is that probably these people's friends and family who are still in the traditional worship of Diana are finding this insulting to them personally. So they're going to ridicule them and heap reproach and insult upon them.
Josh.
Yeah, Pastor.
Sorry. I think something that really stands out here too is this phrase, an inharmonious note in the festive chorus. So I like
Yes.
the literature here, right? They weren't singing the same song.
Yes.
They weren't marching to the same beat, and it was very obvious. And it's like when someone's playing a song on a piano and someone hits the wrong note, it just irritates everybody.
Yes.
And they're just irritating people because they don't fit in. They're not doing what everyone else is doing, and which makes people ridicule and reproach and insult.
Well, but it also means that Paul and the church there is actually being quite effective in the city, because this is a big city, and if it was just a few quacks, they wouldn't even notice. But obviously there's enough people who are not going along with the ceremony this time that it's becoming a problem. She, later in the chapter, Ellen White points out that their efforts were so successful that people who didn't even become fully converted to Christianity, they were at least starting to see through the problems of their heathen deities. They started disbelieving.
Yes, it's the last sentence in this paragraph.
Many who had not openly accepted the new doctrines became so far enlightened as to lose all confidence in their heathen gods. So this struck me because this illustrates a point that I've been thinking about a lot for quite a while that I could never quite resolve. In Revelation, we're told that there's kind of a threefold union. It's described different ways as the how is it called, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. There's also another description where our pioneers had kind of identified this threefold union as Babylon, Mystery Babylon the Great, being Catholicism, apostate Protestantism, and spiritualism. And I often wondered about the spiritualism aspect, because spiritualism doesn't sound like the other two. So you have Catholicism, professed Christianity, apostate Protestantism, also professed Christianity, and then spiritualism, which more and more is finding its way into Christianity, but spiritualism encompasses witchcraft, it encompasses even, you could say, out into the reaches of atheism, which that's the part I didn't quite get. How does atheism and spiritualism and Catholicism and apostate Protestantism, how do these all fit together? And we can see it here in Ephesus. This is really fascinating because as you go through this chapter, you realize that, it talks about it here with Demetrius, a couple of paragraphs later. Demetrius, a manufacturer of silver shrines, called together the workmen of his craft. And then he talks about how, Paul's being successful and it's cutting into our business. And the worship of the pagan deities is essentially the worship of creation. So you worship the sun, moon, and stars. These created things become deified. And so you worship the creation, so part of the expression of worshiping the creation is also creating, especially in the arts. So you have the architecture, you have the arts, you have the works of your hand are like the imitation of the creation itself. And so instead of worshiping the Creator, who has no symbol, there's no symbol, and Paul makes this very clear. We cannot symbolize God. There's no way to do it. And so when you symbolize deity, all you're doing is mimicking creation. That's not the deity. It's the creation of the deity. So Catholicism is the same type of thing. So you have here, there's a whole business surrounding the pagan religion because it supports the arts, but it's a very visual religion. And so you have a lot of arts involved that become that. So that's a whole business in itself. Catholicism, very similar. Lots of arts. There's statues and there's paintings and there's all kinds of images that go along with the worship. You have music, you have the performing arts, you have all kinds of stuff that all kind of combine. And so it supports a lot of business. Then you, with apostate Protestantism, you can see that with the televangelists. They make a whole business out of selling the Christianity. So Christianity is offered to you by you giving money, and then so they've created their own business that way, and they do it other ways too through like the Christian contemporary music industry is this whole big business, but it's really just selling this idea, and then when you get to spiritualism, you have the same thing. So you have the palm readers, but bigger than that. With spiritualism, you also have the religions of today go more scientific. And so the people, the general population, doesn't think spiritually as in the traditional religions. They're less and less inclined toward Catholicism or apostate Protestantism. The biggest group are the people Okay. It's very hard to keep my train of thought when the sound keeps going off. But with spiritualism, I was saying in the French Revolution, they replaced religion, like the traditional religion, with the worship of the goddess of reason. And that sparks, that's around the time of the Enlightenment. And it becomes like religious fervor, exactly like we see in Ephesus. So in Ephesus, they're worshiping this goddess Diana, and with the preaching of Paul and the church, they're showing up how ridiculous the heathen gods are, so that people who don't come all the way to trusting in Christ, at least they start seeing the holes in this ancient pagan system. Yeah, Pastor.
I'm currently reading through the Bible, and I just finished Isaiah. But in Isaiah 44, it talks about
From. And they think that the creation itself is what generated life. That's the whole point of evolution. And where did the idea of evolution first come up? At least first recorded. It might be even older, but the first recorded version of evolution is
Sounds like it's time for a new computer.
Sounds that way. We heard you, Susan.
That's good. Why do you hear me and not
Josh?
Josh?
Yeah, this is not normal.
Well, we'll give that a try. See if
We
that's
hear you, Josh.
all right. Good. We'll see if that slight tweak will get us through the evening. But so I was just fascinated with how easily you can see through this chapter what is really happening here with paganism. You know, so it's very remote and removed from us. So I wanted to try to tie it in today with this modern paganism, which is, that's why Catholicism is both compatible with ancient paganism and with current atheism. It's all kind of the same thing. The Bible has this concept running through it in Daniel and I guess in Revelation also. But there's the conflict between the king of the north, king of the south. And if you don't remember from Daniel what specifically the king of the north and king of the south is, it's basically two principles. And the principle is the king of the north and the king of the south are always battling it out, and one gets the upper hand and then the other gets the upper hand. And in the end, king of the north will win out. King of the north, at times, it represents the religiosity aspect. So it lines up with a false Christianity. But so before there was Christianity, there still was a religion for God. And so you have this, and in the north,